Yeah. Oh, we're live. We're
Now
live.
we're live.
We're live. We're live.
We're live. We're a community trying to figure out technology together. Hello and welcome to Convention Conversations, episode 5. I am your moderator today, Napoleon M. Douglas, and I'm honored to be joining you today to discuss a very important topic, harassment-related concerns. A topic so important, in fact, that the Transparency Coalition will be hosting part 2 on the subject in tomorrow's episode. For now, let's meet our esteemed panel. Delegates, please introduce yourself with your name and pronouns, region and position, and answer the following question in one sentence. Why did you join this union? I'll begin by reintroducing myself. I'm Napoleon Douglas. I'm he, him, his. I am an AEA union actor who is in the New York City area, and I joined the union because I wanted to play Judas in Jesus Christ Superstar, and I wanted some health and 401k benefits. I'll pass it on to Katrina.
Great. My name is Katrina Michaels. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I'm one of your Eastern Principal Delegates, and I'm based in New York City, although the accent does give away that I'm from England, not just the pretentious actor. And as for why I joined the union, great icebreaker question there. I think for me, it was about being able to create a sustainable career with fair wages and protections when inevitable obstacles come along the way.
I love that. How about Ryan?
Hi, I'm Ryan Morales, he, him, pronouns, Eastern Principal Delegate, and I joined the union because that was the thing you did. When you hit a certain point in your career, you join the union. That's what you do. That's how you become a actor who makes especially living in New York City. That's just kind of what you did. And I've learned a lot about being a union member since becoming one.
We'll go back to that in a little bit. Miss Sarah.
Hi, I am Sarah Quinn Taylor. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I am an Eastern Chorus delegate, and it's kind of similar to Ryan and you, Napoleon. Like, I joined because I wanted to work at the Muni in St. Louis, and they were like, join the union, and I was like, okay, cool. But my path to governance is a little bit discovering that everyone, well, not everyone, but a lot of people join for that reason, and just feeling super passionately about what we're doing today. Like, it's educating members and informing them because a union is its members. So we get to solidarity, I think, through education and engagement. So
I love this.
Here we
Also,
go.
getting people in governance one sentence because you give me a paragraph. That's what, if I told you a paragraph, we'd be here all day, right? But we have a hard out hour. And Miss, last but not least, certainly, Miss Katie Young.
Hi, my name is Katie Young. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I am an Eastern Stage Management Delegate, currently in New York, land of the Lenape people, and I joined the union because I wanted fairer pay and access to benefits and protections like set hours and someone to hunt down a paycheck if it didn't come.
Yeah, because we need to be paid for all this work that we're doing. Agreed. Awesome. Thank you all for joining us today, and again for having me here. This is awesome. I'm excited to dig deep into all the work you guys are doing for us. I wanted to save time and put this in the comment section, but this is a non-negotiable, probably because it's important. So we must read this aloud. So to get through this extensive code of conduct, I would love to round robin this. So I want to make sure that I know that our delegates, all of you should have this code of conduct in front of you. Katie, do you as well? You don't.
No, but only because I don't have a computer anymore.
Right, so. Right. As I said, we're fighting technology. Cool.
R.I.P. Lappy Toppy.
I love that. Ryan, can you take the first 2 paragraphs, followed by Katrina taking the next 2 and the 2 agreements? Sarah, you take the following 2 paragraphs, and I will finish off with the last one. Okay? Ryan?
Beautiful.
Great. The Transparency Coalition is a group of delegates of Actors Equity Association dedicated to leadership and communication that is truly representative of our union's members. We're bringing the discussion of convention resolutions and amendments directly to members through a series of live discussions on Facebook and YouTube, allowing members to ask questions and express their support or concerns in real time. First 2 or first 1? Continue. Okay. I feel like we're doing popcorn, like in a school. Each discussion is moderated by a non-union delegate member who will serve, a non-delegate union member who will serve as an important voice of the membership. We will always strive to foster an inclusive, respectful, safe, and brave space to discuss ideas and continue learning.
Our values are collaboration, curiosity, and yes-anding of one another, proposed policy, and the questions and concerns of membership. We are committed to creating an environment that is rooted in respect so that we can productively create and sustain this brave, safe space to discuss complicated issues. We will always extend that respect to members watching, and we seek the same in return. What we ask is that both the members engaging in conversation with us and the delegates themselves hold these two agreements. 1, speak from the I. 2, confront confusion or discomfort with curious questions.
While we are happy to engage in constructive debate, we view harassment and discrimination as a clear threat to free expression and participants' safety, and as such, they will not be tolerated. We ask that the members who engage with us give us the grace to not always know or to get it wrong sometimes. Anytime we don't know the answer to a question, we recognize it as an opportunity to search for information or clarity. I don't know are 3 of the most powerful words there are, followed closely by let me find out.
We bring you this series of convention conversations not only to have a meaningful dialogue with current and future members, but to learn more ourselves about the important policies of our union and to enhance our ability to serve as trusted liaisons for our fellow union members. End of code of conduct. Bravo, bravo. I love it. Especially that last paragraph, right? Which speaks to like us having this dialogue with both current and future members. This isn't a lecture, y'all, everybody who's watching. We encourage that you engage with us in the comment section and YouTube, Facebook, wherever you're watching. If you're watching on your cell phone, your iPad, or wherever it is, this is the one time you have permission to interrupt a Black man. Okay, Touch a Black Man's Radio. If you don't know that reference, right after this stream, please go watch Rush Hour. Thank you. Continuing. I want to start with some like basic questions before we start digging in. Cool. Number one, this is to the entire panel. What is your reaction to votes of harassment and discrimination being kept confidential at the AEA convention? And what will you do to correct that issue? Anybody jump in?
Great. I will say personally, I'm against keeping those records silent. I think that as we create a space that is supportive of survivors, that is supportive of safe working environments, that we hold our governance accountable. It's very hard. I know when I was voting for council for delegates, it's so hard to find out what your members in governance actually stand for and how they collaborate with others. Will they follow through on their commitments? And this is a very tangible way of doing that. Now, I recognize there are very sensitive subjects here. And so, because there's 2 elements to this confidentiality. One is confidentiality on the debate itself, and one is confidentiality on the records. Now, I do think it is important that people who are sharing very personal stories that could involve retaliation if they were to get out, I think there needs to be protection there. So that in order to, I think that for it to be a brave space, there needs to be safety there. And as we push for progressive and inclusive legislation, that we allow some safety there. But I think there's a difference between debate being kept private and records being kept private, and especially kept private from our members who vote for the governance, our members who are going to be affected on the job and off the job, because let's be real, harassment has consequences that extend far beyond the workspaces themselves and have mental health issues and financial issues and physical issues that occur way beyond the scope of when we're currently on a job. And I think we need to err on the side of that access personally. But I am always willing to hear other people's points of view and shift accordingly. But that is something that is important to me. As to your second part on what we can do about it, it is important to note that these convention rules will be voted on, is the second order of business at the convention. And there will be time for debate and amendments. And I think that is something that is definitely worthy of debate.
Wow. Anybody else?
Katie, were you going to say something? You look like you were going to say something. say it, because I have thoughts as well, but go ahead, Katie.
I think so. Currently, the proposal is that there are 4 kind of topics that are confidential: harassment, discrimination, bargaining, and organizing. I believe are the 4, and
Wow.
I can very clearly see the value for the union in keeping our organizing and bargaining priorities and initiatives out of the hands of our employers, because if they know exactly what we want of them, they can figure out how to strategize what is in their best interest. So that is very clear to me, that like it is in our best interest as a union to not share that information publicly, even amongst our members, because we have a lot of members who are also employers, which is pretty unique to this union. In a lot of other unions, like the teachers union, if you become a principal, you have to leave the teachers union, and they get to vote if you can come back if you stop being a principal and want to be a teacher again. So that sort of like hybrid employer union member is a pretty unique situation to deal with. When we're thinking about harassment and discrimination, I think there the lines of who's being protected get really blurry. The intent of the confidentiality, I believe, is that you don't want anyone who's dealt or is dealing with harassment and discrimination to be subject to more of that as a result of their vote. But I think the unintended consequence is that you also don't get to see if people are staying true to their word and voting in line with the way that they're speaking in public or in front of delegates and members. And I think that's really problematic. I agree, Katrina, like this is something that can be changed. And I think the best way, the rules committee could also change it of their own volition. But I'm in favor of it coming as an amendment to the rules at the convention, because then the convention body gets to decide. And if at least 50% of our delegates want those topics to be opened up and accessible to the vote results, then that's what will happen. And I think the other thing that I hope we can do, this is like the long-term game, is seeing where federal policy is weak in protecting leaders and unions from being harassed and discriminated against for their leadership positions. Because if we can't protect our delegates and counselors for using their voice, and they're subject to harassment as a result of that, that's a huge weak spot. But that is a long game federal policy issue that certainly won't be fixed by the convention.
Go ahead, Sarah.
Yeah, no, this is interesting, and it's why I wanted Katie to go first, actually, because I felt like I was gonna like marry the two worlds. Because when we had our meeting about the rules, and I read that was gonna be kept confidential, I immediately was like, no, absolutely not. People, like, no, you're not gonna hide behind your harassment. Like,
I feel like
and I think
the populace would probably have that similar reaction.
Right. And so, but then something that I constantly try to do is, there were people that piped up in the conversation that we had around it that were very passionate on both sides. So instantly I reached out to those people like, hey, and of course, because it's like the last thing of the rules, it was like we had less than 10 minutes to discuss it, and it was probably the most important thing that we could have talked about the entire time. So that was frustrating for me. Yeah. And so I made a point to reach out to those people and be like, hey, I don't feel like I could sense your passion about this, and I don't feel like anybody got enough time. Like it's all about time, right? Like I don't feel like anybody got enough time to hear you. But it kind of goes back to what Katie's talking about, and something that I can't relate to because I've only been in governance since summer, So, but there are people that I've talked to that are like, we are so glad that you have not experienced harassment or blacklisting by a producer. Like, oh, I don't want to hire so-and-so because they're in governance and they can, hold me to task. But that's not the reality of other people. And so I agree with Katie. It's like, because the bureaucracy of the system is so slow, it's like, what's the solution to protect the people that are working to protect the people, right? It's this weird cyclical and I don't know the answer. I think I still come down on the side of ultimately delegates, all delegates, non-counselor and counselor delegates, are democratically elected to this union. So I think I still fall down on the side of like the transparency of it. Like, how do we hold these people accountable? And it was interesting, and I would be interested to know what people think about this, the idea that it's like a voluntary, like an opt-in.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? But so I can opt in and say, yeah, you can, outside of bargaining or whatever, if we made the harassment and discrimination votes opt in, like, yeah. But then I think that would lead to maybe even worse, because if people don't opt in for whatever reason, I think it's very apt that the immediate response of people would be like, oh, well, why aren't you opting in?
Right.
But it's
a very complex issue with a lot of different variables. And we're talking about governance just in AEA as well as on a national level. Like, it's really crazy. And I think there's some interconnectivity though with transparency, which just brings us to forums like this, right? So let's segue into that. I want to throw this at Ryan, because I know that you're one of the kind of leaders at this. We'll respond in your response to what we're talking about now. Can you also explain to us, why do we need these conversations to be transparent? Why doesn't the union want members to know what's going on?
That changes how I want to respond to this. I think I've always gone back to, like, there's a culture thing, and there's a lot of fear in the culture from past experiences and past I guess I'll just leave it at experiences that we've only heard whisperings about. There's a lot of the LA 99C theater comes up in conversation so many times, and I don't think any of us has a full understanding of what that situation was, who was affected, how they were affected, any of that. And so I think there's a lot of fear, and there's a lot of a culture that's built around secrecy in so many arenas, that's built on things happening behind closed doors, by information staying behind closed doors, and for the people that have experienced these things, like, their fear is very legitimate. Their fear is very understandable. And I think the nuance of this conversation is, like, everything has a cost, right? If we released the votes on every single piece of policy, what would be the cost? And my worry is that in this conversation, it only gets looked at in the black and the white. Like, if we really ask the question of, and I wonder if we ask the question of, well, what are we trying to do here? Who are we trying to protect? It helps someone like me, who's like, I think everything should be wide open, go, oh, actually, now it makes sense why we might want the debate on certain things to be kept on lock and key, so that we can have a better debate, so that the union can be better off, and so that people are protected. You know, if we can all debate fully about harassment and share stories that certain people might not be willing to share if it's in a public forum, which is totally their right, then, well, you know, the level of secrecy is very much earned when we're specific about it. And I think about this with bargaining, and this is what I've come to rolling around in my head right now, is that, you know, at what point is, and this is a bit left, but I promise I'm going to bring this back. At what point is hiding information about bargaining being overly secret? Like, if there was a resolution about bargaining that just all our members had was the title, would that really give ammo to producers? Likewise, I wonder if there isn't an ability to have a more nuanced conversation about what might need to be hidden to protect people's votes, so that the votes can be out there in the open, but maybe there's certain things we hide, of the specifics of the language, or the specifics of this, that, and the other, so that we can get the transparency and see how people are voting, but not give the whole bag away. And this is the thing I'm still trying to understand, what Sarah was talking about. If there's, like, really clear reasons why we want to hide the votes, because I'm very much in support of what Katrina and Katie were saying of keeping the discussion under wraps to protect, I think, the whole process and everyone involved. But the votes part for me is like, what does hiding the votes do or protect people from? How does it help the whole situation? And then therefore, can we achieve that without hiding the votes? Is there a more nuanced way to address this? And I think the same could be said with any of the recorded votes. I think we could, in a more nuanced way, address all of the recorded votes and potentially make it so that way more information can be out there for our members that serves them without giving away the goose, so to speak.
Yeah, so we're kind of playing with this, and Katie, I want you to jump in because we're kind of talking about like transparency versus like being anonymous versus, you know, what the information is disseminated to the public, you know, the public masses beyond just people who are invested in actors' equity. Like, what are things that I could Google and look up or CNN can report on versus like what things we keep in house? Or like, what are your reactions to all of this?
I mean, I think that like a really clear reason for me why we should not be publishing votes on bargaining and negotiation or organizing matters is that if 51% of delegates vote that, you know, it's really important for us to fight for a 3-day work week, our negotiating partners are going to know that only 51% of our members in that body support that. And that puts us in a weak position. Whereas if Actors Equity meets our bargaining partners at the bargaining table and says, listen, we're really invested. Our members have decided that we're fighting for a 3-day work week, and that's what we're asking for. Yeah. It does change that dynamic. So I think that there are absolutely reasons to keep those things to ourselves.
Well, I think something you're highlighting too is that there's an unfortunate reality, no matter where you lie, if you're an actor, a stage manager, a producer, or not a producer, but like we are under the control a lot of the based on the decisions of what these producers and theater houses and all these different things are. It sounds like that we're kind of limiting how we operate based on how others might react. Is that what I'm hearing?
No, I don't know that I would necessarily frame it that way. I think that you're right in saying that employers have a lot of control, because there's nothing stopping an employer from asking people to work 3 days a week when they're paying them to work 6 days a week. They can do that. There's nothing stopping our employers from no longer using 10 out of 12s. There's nothing stopping our employers from rehearsing 5 days a week instead of 6. There's nothing stopping our employers from offering better than the minimums that we've negotiated. But it is important to keep in mind, I think there's a little bit of a misunderstanding, or like, I don't even know if it's like an active misunderstanding so much as just like a cultural misunderstanding, that like Actors Equity Association is imposing our rule books. I hate the word rule books on employers. No, these are negotiated contracts that Actors Equity Association and our employers have agreed to, and they've both signed on to them. So in that sense, we have just as much power as the employers. It's just that it can be really scary because the full weight of that power is refusing to work. So when we're thinking about how do we flex our power with our employers, it's saying that we're not going to work if you aren't going to meet the conditions that we're asking for. And that is the incredible power of unions, because no single one of us would get the outcome that we're looking for if we said, I'm not going to take this contract if you're not going to let me go to my best friend's wedding. True story. They'll just be like, okay, I understand that you can't take this contract. Bye. So that is the power of unions. It is the ability to stand up to employers and multi-employer groups and set a baseline minimum standard. Wow. Such a juicy, I would love to continue, but like y'all said, we have 60 minutes. We have so much to talk about and not so much time. So as we're talking about what unions can do and how they can support our community and support, our professional interests and things like that, let's talk about the task at hand, shall we? Harassment. Katie, you're one of the creators of this resolution. So let's actually, I'm even going to skip that. Let's get right to the discussion. You contributed, if I'm understanding correctly, you contributed to 5 resolutions that are attempting to be combined, correct? Compound. Yes, there might even be 6. Let me see if I can list them all off the top of my head. And
so you don't have to go through them, but I just wanted to make sure that. Yeah, absolutely. Oh yeah. Come on, this is why we're here. We want to.
I wrote a couple of them, but honestly, most of the people that wrote all of these resolutions that ended up getting combined have been working together over the last 6 or 7 months to craft
That's
them.
awesome. And let's clarify for our listening audience that there is a disclaimer that all of these amendments and resolutions, the ones that we're talking about in this a conversation, any of the other resolutions that are being brought forth on this platform, are all in a revision period through today, April 11th. So many makers are still refining or contributing resolutions. I actually did the math, and there's been 38% consolidation so far. So final wording will hopefully be available in the next few days. But know that, like, as we're leading to the convention, which is happening in the next couple of weeks, April 25th, if I'm not lying. Nailed it. I was like, I think I've heard that, through the grapevine. There's still a lot of work to be done, right? And we're in this again, I think, and hopefully another positive to have these conversations. Katie, tell us about this harassment resolution, what prompted its creation, and the actionable items that it intends to implement, kind of overall, and then we can go and kind of hit the different ones.
Yeah, so there was a group of, honestly, delegates and non-delegates who, leading up to the delegate election, felt very strongly that this was a really important topic to bring in front of governance in a way that emphasized the real world experiences that our members have with harassment and discrimination.
Mm-hmm.
And I just want to say really quickly, as a preface to this whole conversation, legally, harassment is under the umbrella of discrimination. So if you're looking at our contracts, you're not going to find a harassment clause, but you will oftentimes, if not always, find a discrimination clause. So it's important to know that we've carefully crafted these resolutions to ask for things regarding harassment beyond just sexual harassment. That extends to harassment for like racial harassment. It extends to gender harassment. It extends to bullying. Like, it's a little bit broader than what we might immediately think when we hear the word harassment and go to sexual harassment. And so let me see if I can summarize the things we are asking for. We're asking for a one-page resource to very clearly outline things like how to recognize harassment in the workplace, how to be a good ally, and report harassment that you witness, how to report harassment for yourself, the different ways in which you can report harassment. You can report it to the union, you can report it to your employer, you can report it to law enforcement, and helping members understand what the results of all of those are. Because if you want someone to go to jail, you shouldn't only report them to your union, because your union can't put them in jail.
Right.
And if you want someone to get kicked out of the union for their behavior, law enforcement probably isn't going to be able to help you with that very much. Right. So knowing the different pathways, knowing how to recognize retaliation and understanding your legal protections from retaliation, things like that. So having the information in the resource that you can read in advance, because it's really hard to access these things in a moment of crisis. So trying to make it more readily available for people, so that they don't have to do that work in a crisis moment. That's number one. Number two is asking for Actors Equity Association to partner with sibling unions across the entertainment industry, in theater, in film and TV, any union who is excited to address harassment holistically, because the freelance nature of the industry, you can have an abuser who bounces around from theater to theater. You can have abusers across unions. Maybe someone gets kind of found out in the theater world and then starts working in film, or, there's so much fluidity for our workers. And I think the true solution to this issue in the industry won't come until there's really thoughtful collaboration. There is a resolution about a 3-strike system within Actors Equity Association. So if I slap Sarah, Sarah can report that to Actors Equity Association and say, Katie and I were working on a contract together. She slapped me. Katrina saw it. I'd like to bring charges. Yeah. And then one of our regional boards, we will bring together a group of union members to essentially serve as like a jury of sorts. they'll hear from me, they'll hear from Sarah, they'll look for witnesses, maybe Katrina gets interviewed, and they'll decide, did Katie slap Sarah? And if she did, how are we gonna punish Katie?
They're not going to ask if it was a front hand smack or a backhand.
I mean, maybe that changes the punishment. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe sorry, we probably shouldn't be making jokes about physical abuse. Let me stay in my lane, please.
But what this 3-strike system is asking for is maybe Sarah's really afraid to come forward and say, Katie slapped me.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe she makes a report anonymously through the Lighthouse app. Or maybe she has a good relationship with her business rep and she says, Katie slapped me. I don't want to bring charges because I just want to move on and be done with it. Well, then I go to another rehearsal room and I slap Katrina. And then a week later, I go to another room and I slap Ryan. All of these people make anonymous reports or make a report but ask not to bring charges. But now equity has heard that I've now slapped 3 people. And so this 3-strike system is asking for the union to bring charges against a member after 3 reports, whether they're anonymous reports or not. And then at that point, the accused union member, in this case myself, would still go through that disciplinary board process. You would still get your hearing of sorts. It's not just 3 strikes and you're guilty. But we feel this is really important because reporting is intimidating. Going through any sort of justice process can be really intimidating. It can be re-traumatizing. But we don't want that to be the reason that chronic abusers are slipping through our internal discipline system. This
That's
is
pretty fair. Before you go on, I want to actually stick to this 3-strike system. Let me I'm actually read the proposed.
You want to pull it up?
Yeah, it's right here. Be it resolved. No, is it originally track and report harassment data?
Nope, that's a different one.
There are so many. Hold on, I got you. Because I think this is very, very important.
It's part D, Napoleon.
Oh, perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, D and E. Yeah.
Part D, it's open now. Be it resolved. Originally, this was called, for our viewers, Harassment 3-strike system. Be it resolved that convention strongly recommends that council implement a 3-strike system in order to hold chronic abusers, harassers, and assaulters accountable. Within this system, each report filed against a member for harassment is tracked, and after no more than 3 reports, AEA is compelled to bring charges against the accused, even if no single report was escalated to charges. This then continues to read, be it further resolved that the system should not stand in the way of AEA bringing charges against a member for harassment or otherwise after fewer than 3 strikes. So that was it's basically kind of what you were just talking about with the 3-strike system. This sounds good. It sounds okay, but I'm wondering if we've learned, and maybe I'm thinking from the accuser. I'm getting my words mixed up, but but have we learned anything from endless number of Black men that have fallen victim to false claims? Emmett Till rings a bell, and we can even actually bring it to something more current. It was in June of 2020. Gospel legend Richard Smallwood calls out historic Walnut Theater in Philadelphia for alleged discrimination, which is, again, for all of us listening, because I just learned this too, harassment falls under the umbrella of discrimination. And even as you say that, Katie, it reminds me of that little clause that you see in most of your contracts, whether you're working theater or non. Anyway, Smallwood spoke out on his Facebook and Instagram pages this week, demanding justice at the historic Walnut Street Theater for Blacks allegedly fired at America's oldest theater, founded in 1809. So we got a lot of history. According to Smallwood, a white woman named Hallie Hargis alleged a Black man, Ladarian J. Taylor, was sexually harassing her when they worked together at the theater a couple of years ago. According to Taylor, there were 2 young actors working in the theater production at the theater. And at the theater, Hargis kept complaining about everything he did, including his mention of the name Jesus or any reference he might make to his faith. She also referenced, and so I think this is important. I bring this up too because, like you said, there's bigger things than just sexual abuse, right? And sexual harassment. Like this is somebody being harassed for their religion. She also referenced the noose to him throughout the game of charades, he alleges, a disturbing reminder of the thousands of blacks killed with a noose in a rope by hanging for decades. She then went to management and made up allegations of feeling harassed, and I was abruptly fired by the Walnut Theater after a production without a full hearing or real investigation. Katie, please tell me, as you were starting to sum up, how this resolution is going to protect people like Ladarian.
Yeah, so I think important to just bring to light the last phrase of that last sentence, fired without any sort of investigation, which the whole purpose of the disciplinary board is that there is an investigation. So the 3-strike system isn't saying 3 strikes and you're out. The 3-strike system says 3 strikes and we need to look into this. And I totally hear what you're saying, Napoleon, about how do we protect people from false accusations. I think it's a little less likely to get repeated false accusations about a single person. That being said, there's also another resolution that Kimberly Chatterjee wrote. She's also one of the writers on these harassment resolutions that is specifically addressing the makeup and training for our disciplinary boards. So part of that is calling for at least 50% BIPOC members being on those disciplinary boards. And the other aspect of that is standardizing the training and process for selecting disciplinary boards across the regions, because currently that process is kind of like set up and implemented by each regional vice president, which can lead to a lot of variance between regions. And you're not necessarily going up in front of a regional board where you reside. It could be sent to a different region because of the specific context. Maybe it's where the workplace was. Maybe it's which regional board has the capacity to take on a hearing at the time. So it's important that we standardize that across the regions to make sure that people are trained to do this work. They do it in conjunction with Equity's lawyer, but we want to make sure that people are trained and that we are fighting our own biases and making sure that we are providing justice and not just vengeance, you know?
I love that. I have you said a statement, I don't know if I necessarily agree with, that you think that repeat offenders or repeat false accusations might not come. And I don't know if we have like the stats to like really back that up. But in
That's
that,
fair.
their union has still done nothing for Ladarian. So in all these actions, are we consciously thinking about even retroactive cases of people who have been harassed and discriminated against, or all these different things? And how do we then resolve? You know, because we were talking about at the beginning of this, how transparency kind of falls with reputation, right? And in our industry, that it's all about networking, who we know, and all of this. So I'm wondering, how do we, you know, his career could still be affected. I mean, I Googled that, you know, like that his Walnut Street Theater, that's huge. How do we then allow this person, once we get post all this and we get back to working, how does that not walk with him?
I think there are a couple. Sarah, do you want to chime in?
I want to ask one quick question. The 3 strike, this is literally just clarifying because I don't know. The 3 strikes thing, I'm assuming that's 3 reports from different individuals.
It's a good question. I don't know that it has to necessarily be, because I think that it is valuable for the system to be able to track an ongoing harassment issue over time. But again, that's the sort of nuance and information that the disciplinary board, I think, has to consider.
Right. Like then the board would be like, oh, in this case, there's this many reports from this many people versus, oh, Sarah has posted about Ryan 5 times. You know, yeah, that's a good point.
Ryan, go ahead, Sarah. Continue, and then Ryan jump in after.
I think it's interesting and actually the thing that is most encouraging to me about these resolutions in general is the resolved clause about working across unions, because that was something I brought up to actually our like legal counsel, Equities legal counsel, is like we see so often a factor of abuse or harassment or anything is the power dynamic. And so, and basically I was told in no uncertain terms that if I can report to the Lighthouse app that X director or whoever harassed me, assaulted me, whatever it may be, but the scope, and part of this, again, it's so intertwined with labor law and government, is like the protections that don't exist there.
Yeah.
Part of the issue is that our union, if I'm harassed by a director who's in SDC, that's the director and choreographers union,
Right.
there's not really anything actionable that my union can do about them. But that's like such a huge, well, yeah, it gets into like a lot of gray areas, but that's something I'm so interested about coming out of this COVID era, I guess, and like really holding these people to task, like holding them to account of, these are not, like, this is about safety. And I think a lot of times, you know, it goes beyond making sure if you're standing on a 20-foot platform that you have the correct protection. Like it's, yeah. I'm interested in how we work across the entire industry because I could see something like this 3 strikes thing, or I think we're limited with Lighthouse. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Davon just dropped in the chat the mention of this app called Callisto. And it's actually, I think if people aren't familiar with it, Callisto, it's used predominantly with like universities, but it's kind of an app that's like technology to cross-reference these things and these names, and you get hooked up with people. But I think we have to start thinking about something like that, because me being able to report on the Lighthouse app anonymously, action could only be taken if they're also an equity member. And, you know, this industry is that wrong?
I do want to step in a little bit, because it's not that no action can be taken by equity if the issue is cross-union, but most of their power in that instance is holding the employer accountable for providing a safe workplace. That is our unions. That is a big purpose of our union. And so, Sarah, if you did report, like, I am currently working on this show and this director has assaulted me, you report that to the Lighthouse app. Maybe you don't say that, hi, this is Sarah, but maybe you do say like what the theater is or who the director is. Then yeah, the union can absolutely go to that employer and say, we have a report that there's an unsafe workplace, and we need to see what's going to be done to correct that. So the union's power drastically diminishes once you're off contract with that employer, because so much of it is that the employer has failed to provide you with a safe workplace. The union, that's not the union's job to provide you with a safe workplace. That's the employer's job. It's the union's job to help ensure that you're actually getting those protections.
Okay, I have a question. Hold on. Ryan, go ahead. I know you've been sitting on the comment for a while.
Well, I just wanted to start out by saying that I think all of this is amazing, awesome work, and I'm very excited to, vote yes on all of this. So this, the comment that follows is not as much of a. I'm doing my best to say yes and, especially what Napoleon brought up, which is I think what I wish was part of this as well is if we're putting more power into the hands of a system, how well is that system currently functioning? Because I think it's something that happens a lot is if we say, okay, there are already these systems in place, let's solve this problem by rerouting some of the power to that system. How well is that system functioning? And if the answer is the system functions great, if our disciplinary system is going great, and I think Kim has already working to address that in some ways. But if the system isn't working well, though, I'm always hesitant to add more power to something that isn't working without fixing the thing that isn't working over there. And so I don't think that this particular concern personally is enough of a reason to not want to support this wholeheartedly. But I think that the next step for my mind is, and maybe this is a next convention thing or something that needs to be investigated internally, but how well, if we're going to give more power to equity's disciplinary system, how well is that system actually working? Because I think that to me gets to the heart of what Napoleon is saying, of the concern that this could be weaponized. This could be weaponized against people.
We also have language that is now in this, we're calling it the Unified Harassment Resolution or something very simple. Unified is used in the new title.
Yes.
But another thing we're calling for is tracking the data on how our harassment reporting and discipline systems are functioning, because you're right, we should be able to see if people are using Lighthouse, if people are talking to their business reps, how many of those discussions with business reps get elevated to charges, how many of those charges get elevated to guilty verdicts, and then how many people are getting kicked out for harassment. And I think that we need that information in order to make an educated decision on how the system is functioning. But so much of what I'm hearing come up in today's conversation is really linked back to the fact that, like, harassment issues, as with many of our workplace concerns, are very interdependent. Yeah, we need to fix our disciplinary system. Yeah, we need to make our disciplinary systems more accessible. Yeah, we've got to be able to collaborate with other people in our industry, because abusers and victims are everywhere. Like, you can't really fix just one of these things and solve the problem. If we're educating people really well, great. One of the things that I think is really important to educate people on Napoleon is how to document things. So in the Walnut Theater story, like, how could he have documented his experience so that if he did get called in front of a disciplinary board, he could say, actually, I've been harassed by this person for the last 6 months. Here's the text I sent to my stage manager. Here's my email with the company manager. Here's the text I sent to my best friend, like, the day after this happened. All of these things to help track for ourselves. And we can do that regardless of what side of the conversation we're sitting on, of, like, how can you prove your point? And I don't want an environment where everyone is, like, constantly, like, trying to keep receipts of every single encounter they had. But I think it is important to empower people with the knowledge of how to effectively document something so that they're protected when they feel like they might be in an unsafe situation.
I love that. Let me read the resolution. Then Katrina, we haven't heard from you, so I would love a reaction from you, but let's listen to the language that this committee, which again, let's take a moment, and I meant to do it in the beginning. Let me just say thank you, because you guys are doing this all free of your time, all these resolutions and everything. Like, I've seen a backseat of it, but it's very admirable to know that you're right. Not one thing is going to solve all these problems, but it takes effort to get somewhere. So I think that should be acknowledged. So this was originally track and report harassment data. Be it resolved, Convention strongly recommends that Council implements a national system to track and monitor reports of abuse and harassment. From this, patterns of abuse and harassment must be identified and action be taken to prevent further abuse and harassment of our members, particularly from repeat offender bad apples in quotations. Be it further resolved that Convention strongly recommends that annually AEA report numerical data about the number of harassment reports filed, regardless of methodology, i.e. business rep versus Lighthouse app that we've talked about versus the app that Davon Williams threw into the comments there. The number of charges brought forth the number of charges brought for harassment, the number of harassment charges ruled guilty, and the number of members removed from the union for harassment. This report should be available to members at large via the member portal. And a comment from our makers, so what Katie's our spokesperson, is that number one, tracking reports across regions will help protect our members from abusers and identify repeat offenders. And two, reporting out of numerical data regarding harassment shows members and survivors that action is in fact being taken by the union when charges are being brought against the abuser. Katrina, we've watched these town halls where I've read other proposed legislation like the Black Theater Matters bill that had over 500 contributors, including me, countless clubhouse discussions, and even streamed discussions like this. And we all agree that we have a communication problem. So now listening to what this proposed resolution is doing, how do you see this proposition turning into something actionable? And what do you think that looks like most effectively?
Sure. I mean, in terms of this specific resolution that's looking at tracking and looking at possible outcomes, ultimately the data is there, it's accessible, it's just not being utilized, it's not being provided to members. And I will say, as someone who has reported harassment to a business representative and heard nothing back, despite most, but like knowing there is a risk you take in reporting harassment, and knowing, having the information at hand at what are the possible outcomes? Is this taken seriously? What are the steps, so I can prepare myself, so I can have, expectations based in what is going on, so that I know that I have a support system, is only going to help people feel safe in coming forward and feel empowered by them taking control of this process. And a process, as we've talked earlier, that's often rooted in power dynamics. And how can we empower people to kind of reclaim their experience of this and decide ultimately what do they want to do, how do they want to do it, and what are the possibilities here? And having so much of it can often feel opaque, and you're scrambling with not only with the situation, but just trying to get access to like what is possible, how do I navigate this? Yeah. And so I think it allows for someone to make assessments about what are the possibilities, how can this turn out, and then also then use that to then protect themselves and feel engaged and empowered in this. And a lot of us work in various regions around the country, and it can be tough to get like consolidated information. I think it's so important as our artists travel, but also we have directors who travel. We have, it's not just actors and stage managers themselves, but having concrete national information. And, so often this behavior is a pattern, but if we don't record and document the individuals, you can't see the pattern. Right. And I've worked at too many places where day one of rehearsal, I've been told not to be in the room alone with a certain person. We know these patterns exist, but we need to actually know what is the action that is actually being taken, and how do we hold that accountable? Yeah, Katie.
I want to add, because in doing all of this work, I had a very big light bulb of something that we can all individually do to make this better. And it was born out of the fact that I oftentimes feel that even our employers who have their like one-page harassment policy, which in New York State is now a law that employers have to have this and provide it. And maybe there are employers outside of New York who are opting to do that too. Sometimes it is very clear that they've done little to no work beyond typing up one page of characters. And something that we can all do is, when they have that 5-minute conversation in your first rehearsal meeting, ask questions. Say, okay, great, I see that company manager is who I'm supposed to report to if I have any harassment issues or concerns. Can you just fill us in on what kind of training they've received by way of receiving harassment concerns? Or I was wondering if you could tell us about a time, without giving away like specific details, where this company has dealt with harassment and what that process looked like. Things where you make your employer think about what they're going to do when they actually get a complaint, because that piece of paper is garbage if you haven't actually thought through the process and have a plan. Because if you're not prepared when somebody comes to you and says, this actor touched me inappropriately, too often the response is something like, well, let me know if it happens again. Or, well, why don't you just like wait a couple minutes to do your cross backstage later so that you're not crossing paths with them then. And those sorts of solutions are not a harassment policy. That is not a protocol.
Yeah.
And we can be asking our employers to think through those questions. And probably if they haven't, they will realize just how little they have when we ask those questions and when we ask them in public so that everyone has the information.
Yeah.
And just jumping in on the let me know if it happens again. Also, that like a joint idea often is let me know when that escalates. It has to like reach a certain level of harassment to actually be held accountable. And I think having clear definitions both for artists and employers on what constitutes harassment and is really important. Just yeah.
Well, and I think it's a very complex kind of, it's muddy waters because our industry is, right. You know, a lot of these, you know, employers and things that we're speaking about become our friends that we go out to the bars with after the show, and like, you know, somebody's partner or like something. There's always we're a community, right? And that's the beauty and the curse of it, is that we all take care of each other. And you know, I'm blessed to be in a lot of positions where I do like performing arts management. And the one thing I tell them is that the nice thing about it is that I was an actor first. So like, if you don't have that right shade of mascara or whatever, that's why I don't do makeup, because I don't know what I'm saying. But like, if you don't have that, you know, I understand how that might be a little bigger than to somebody who might not really relate to, you know, what we go through to use ourselves as our product, or to use ourselves in every faction of that idea. So,
I
wow.
think
Go ahead.
the only thing I'll add, because I know we're close to time, is that I think that this resolution, all of us sitting for a year plus and looking at hard conversations like this, presents such an amazing opportunity for a cultural shift, but also a cultural shift in our leadership. Because I know personally, I was on a national tour prior to COVID, and we got, you know, this video about harassment that we all sat around, and it was also like, oh, watch it on your own time, sign a thing that said you did it, you know? And so like, but we're all sitting around, and I like jokingly, but not jokingly, because it's a serious topic, I was like, this looks like it could be in like an episode of The Office. Like, this is what is this? And so I reached out to management, and I was like, hey, and just like you said, Napoleon, it's this weird, muddy gray area. I mean, what other time do employees go to work and kiss someone else? Or it, like, there's all of these just weird, and it starts at the university level, and even before that, if you don't choose to go to university. And so it's this cultural shift that I think we have a huge opportunity to address. And like Katie said, asking questions of our employers. Great. How about the unions collectively in the arts and entertainment industry go to those employers and hold them to this standard of, hey, actually, we collaborated with all of these brilliant minds, and we made this video footage. Play it on day one. Like, you know, it's this whole really exciting opportunity, huge Herculean task, but an exciting opportunity to change the culture, truly. And I hope that when we start stepping back into these places, people start to call it out, you know, and feel empowered then to call it out because they see other people calling it out. That's something personally that I hope, you know, backs up all of this work that's being done in the system that can be slow and bureaucratic and all of that, you know.
Yeah, I think we can all agree that, you know, this is just the first step of many, you know. So, you know, kudos and to all of you, and for all of you guys' works through these resolutions. Bringing it back, Katie, is there anything about this resolution that you think we missed or that needs to be highlighted, or otherwise let them know, you know, what the next steps are? I don't know. Any last
we might have missed something, but I think we also had a really substantive discussion, so that's great. You know, if you're a delegate, I hope you'll vote for this. It is advisory to council, so all of these, if the unified resolution does get sent as approved from convention, it'll go to council next. But in the meantime, that there's no reason that we as individuals can't be educating ourselves on how to be better allies, how to recognize harassment, understanding what our rights are. there are federal protections, but oftentimes it's more the state harassment laws that will have a more tangible impact on what your rights are. So do a little bit of Googling. If you have any questions, you can always reach out to me on Facebook, or my dog's Instagram is @HenryMcGoober.
Hey, I love dogs. What kind of dog is it?
An Instagram live. He's a hound mix.
Oh.
Wait, most importantly, how is Peanut Butter? The people need to know.
Doing good. I have a new foster dog who's very shy, so he's in the other room. But
we love puppies. We love puppies. We're gonna have puppies. Thank you.
Final thing I'll say.
Oh no, go ahead.
Final thing I'll say is that as much work as we've been doing on harassment, Equity has been very attentive. This is definitely a topic that the organization wants to address as much as the members want to address. So if you've had a negative experience reporting harassment in the past, don't let that discourage you from reporting again. Staff has had new training on receiving harassment reports since this last fall. Andrea Hessian, who is our new Central Regional Director, was brought in, unfortunately for her, like February or March of 2020. So she's had a very unique experience with Equity, but she has a background in harassment law. Devon put something, and all I saw was Maria Cristina Posada Sly, who is.
I can speak to that. Yeah, on the receipts
phenomenal.
with Devon. Yeah, she has every episode for season 14. I'm sorry, there's been 14 episodes of season 2. She's been coming with her sly comments, which have all been about harassment and the different resources. Go check that out at thereceiptswithed.com. You can just see all of those little plugs that she put in there. Another Eastern Chorus delegate that we have.
Hey, Poe, can I respond to Davon's comment as well, real quick too?
Go ahead.
So Davon's right. The plan right now is not. We don't have the time to dive into the amazing Black Theater Matters bill. And Devon has his own show that's been running it. So it probably is not the first or the last. It's probably won't be the last time that the Black Theater Matter bills comes up on here, even though we won't be discussing it this time around. But please check out his show if you want to learn more about the bill, or you can just see it online and read it and ask him questions. So just wanted to make sure that comment was elevated and clarified.
Yes. Elevate all the comments. Where's the little comments? I can see these. Oh, look at that. We have people watching. Thank you guys so much for bringing me to do this. This is awesome. Thank you for having the platform to create this transparency for everybody. I want to remind you all that the Transparency Coalition will continue to have these conversations, these episodes, They'll be streamed live daily from now until April 24th, which is the eve of our first inaugural AEA convention that we've been talking about for months and everybody's excited about. And then hopefully you guys can go back to like some type of normalcy of life. Join us tomorrow, Monday, April 12th at an announced time. That'll be announced later to continue discussing this topic, as well as some other harassment-related resolutions that are being proposed. So it's been fun. Another episode 5 down. Have a great day, and we will see you all soon.
Bye. Bye, Peanut Butter.
Yes.
Bye, Peanut Butter.